Okay, B'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we're starting today's daf is Daf Kuf Tes Vav in Chulin. We'll be starting B'ez Hashem from Daf Kuf Yudal Ramad Beis, 2 lines from the bottom, where we have a Siman Shabbos Chayrish Ukulei Zroim Oisev Es B'nei Shluch Hakan. What is this mix? What is this challenge? So the answer to that is that we said before that Rav Ashi Gezok that Lo Soichlu, there's an Isser of eating anything that's a Teyeva. Anything that the Torah doesn't like becomes a teyeva. So these are things that the Gemara is going to ask about from Rav Ashi. Elamayat, the last 2 words on the page. But then, Ma'aseh Shabbos Litzeru, the product of Melecha Shabbos should be also for consumption. Dehati Avti Lachu, because the product is something that I have abominated for you. Since the Torah forbids doing Melecha on Shabbos, cautioning us to, stay away from such Melecha. And the taitzah, the product of such malacha is l'chayra teyeva. So according to the way Rav Ashi understands it, it follows that if a person cooks on Shabbos, the ma'aseh Shabbos is also for all Yidden. However, we learned in the Brisa before on Tezvav, right? It was exactly 100 blot ago that if a person cooks intentionally on Shabbos, it's also only for him due to a rabbinical penalty, but it's permitted for consumption by other Yidden. So l'chayra, that doesn't stem so good with what Rav Ashi is saying. Omar Kra, the morning, the pasuk state, Ki kodesh hilachem, you should keep Shabbos because it is kodesh for you. He kodesh, vein maser kodesh. This implies that only the Shabbos itself is kodesh, but the products are not kodesh. Meaning the products of its forbidden malachas are not treated as dvarim ha'asurim, which are also for consumption and for benefit. Now the Gemara goes to the next question on Rav Ashi. If a person plows with an ox and a donkey, or if a person muzzles the mouth of a cow and threshes with it, which are prohibited, as the Torah says, you shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together, and the pasuk also says, you shall not muzzle an ox while it is threshing. So let's rule that the produce of the plowed field and the threshed grain become asur for consumption and behana. Because it's a product of something that's considered a teyeva. It's like the Gemara say, no, hashto ma Shabbos the chamira. Consider now that if even with respect to Shabbos, which is chamer maseh mutarim, so the products of the malacha are mutar, ahani lekol shekain, is it not certain that the products of these less chamer isurim are going to be permitted? A person who's machal Shabbos b'meizid is subject to kares, while a person who's over the typical lavin, such as these mentioned here, is only mechuyev malchus. So just as the product of chilul Shabbos is not forbidden b'hanoah, so too we may learn out from this kal v'chomer that the produce of a field plowed with diverse species and the grain threshed with a muzzled cow are mutar b'hanoah. This kal v'chomer, however, does not serve to allow the benefit of basar b'chalav as well, because although a person who cooks basar b'chalav is only subject to malchus, nevertheless we learn from the pasuk, you shall not eat any abomination like sechel kol tayeva. The basar b'chalav is going to be asur b'hana. According to Rav Ashi, klayim of ziraim, klayim of seeds should be asur for consumption and benefit the hati avti lachu, because it's something I have abominated for you. Right. So in this case, the mixture of seeds itself is abominated. It's something that's a teyeva due to the Torah's isser against planting mixed seeds. The produce should be included in the Torah's isser against eating a teyeva because it's similar like basar b'chalav. However, we know that kilei zraim are mutar b'hana, like the Mishnah says in Klayim at the beginning of Parak Ches. So it's actually more like this. From that which the Torah revealed to us in regard to kilei hakarim, which is the ikar isser Klayim deraisa, that you should not plant your vineyard with a mixture, lest the fullness of the seed being sown be forfeited, become tikdash, become us. So the word tikdash means tista'ev, as the Targum says, which means will become unfit. Is derived from the word kadesh, commonly associated with the term kedusha. However, Rashi there explains that both definitions are actually one and the same. Wherever an object is off limits for a man, whether because it's holy or because it's asur, it may be referred to with a derivative of the shayresh of kadosh, used to convey the sense of his inaccessibility. For example, I think there's a lot of rate about this in the beginning of Kedushin, the Surah Kuli Alma Kehektish. Is that because there's Kedusha? Is that because she's Asur? It's a big shmooze, and I think they're all true. So pen take dash. So pen tukat h. So the word tikta should not be expounded by the Gemara in a different manner, extending this isser to aser, the deriving of hana as well. So pen tukad eish, the word tiktash is interpreted as a contraction of the two words tukad eish, which means will be burned by fire, and the pasuk therefore means lest it be burned by fire, and meaning become aser and require burning in a fire. Michlal the kilei zraim shar, which implies that the kilei zraim, other than kilei hakerem, are going to be mutar b'hana. The Gemara continues to ask on this. But according to Rashi's explanation, let us say that kilei akarma are also ba'achila and b'hana, for consumption and for benefit. However, kilei zraim, climb of other seeds, are also only ba'achila but are mutar b'hana. Right? Granted that it's evident from the fact that the Torah specifically asks kilei akarim b'hana, the climb of zraim is not included in the Isser against hana, included in the Isra of Hana. Nevertheless, perhaps such a mixture is nonetheless included in the basic Isra against any Teyeva, which was mentioned clearly in the Pasuk. And the Gemara answers like this: Iskash l'kilei behema. By saying the halach is l'kilei zraim and animals together, the climb of seeds are compared in the Pasuk to climb of animals. The Pasuk state, you shall not mate your animal with a diverse kind, you shall not plant your field with diverse kinds. So the hekesh of these two forms of climb teaches the just as with respect to the climb of your animal, the product that comes forth from it is motor even ba'achila, so too with respect to planting climb of kilei zraim in your field, the product that comes forth from it is permitted even ba'achila. As the Gemara will explain, and where do we know that the offspring of climb of animals themselves are motor? Why? Since the Torah makes a teyeva of the mixing of being marbia, the seed of diverse species of animals, eating the offspring shalachara bia teyeva itself, which was aser according to Rav Ashi's drasha. So Zakti Gemara, but the aser achmana climb legavaya mechlad l'hediyat chari, from that which the Torah aser a climb as a korban legavaya to the Most High, for a korban to Hashem, as the pasuk says, "Share kesev yezki v'alid v'yeshivas yom tachas imay umayim hashmini v'halei rotz l'korban yishal Hashem," which is a pasuk we should be familiar with, which we darshan in the parak of Yisves Benai. An ox, sheep, or a goat, when it was born, shall remain under its mother for 7 days, and from the 8th day on shall be acceptable for a korban to Hashem. The fact that the Torah specifies a sheep or goat rather than a sheep and goat indicates that a crossbreed of the two is no good for a korban. So it's evident that for a common man, it's going to be mutter. For if it was indeed usher for a regular person, no drasha would be needed to teach that it's disqualified for use as a korban, since it's invalid regardless, as the pasuk says that describes korbanos as meimashke Yisrael, which the Gemara and Tamura and Daf Chav Tes means, and elsewhere also, that it's something that has to be fit for the Yidden to be able to eat. And since this is going to be climbed, so l'chayr, this should be something that's alam al asr. Says frankly Gemara Nachik Kasha. Oh, so that's why. So let's finish up with the climb. That the pshat is that from the fact that climb kilei behemal kapanim is dach asa for karbanos. So if it's asa for karbanos, it's dafka for karbanos, and is going to be mutter in Chulin. And over here, the lashon Gemara's mechlad l'hediyat is going to be mutter. So that's where the makar is that climb is going to be mutter. Let an animal that's subject to the Yisr Vayses B'nai, not meaning Asr to Shecht on the same day, Asr Bahana and Ba'achila. As we know, going back a few blocks before we started recording the Daf Shears, that the Torah asks Shechting two together in one day, as the pasuk says, "V'shar Oiseh Oiseh Ves B'nai L'Shishcha to be Echad," an ox or a sheep, it and its offspring you shall not shecht in one day. So if the mother was shechted, the offspring would not be shechted on that day, and if the offspring was shechted, the mother would not be shechted on that day. Nevertheless, even the second one shechted is mutter ba'achila, as we have seen before on Daf Ayin Ches. So Zakti Gemara like this: from that which the Torah asked a premature korban for the mizbeach, it's evident that for a common person is going to be mutter. And mechus man, a premature korban refers to an animal that is presently unfit for a korban, but will be fit at a later date. It will mature, will be older, and will be able to be bred as a korban. Generally refers to an animal that's less than 8 days old, which is excluded for use as a carbon by the Torah, like we just said in the pasuk. Miyayim hashmini v'hali ratzal carbon yishal Hashem. An animal whose mother shechted that day may also be viewed as a mechusas man, because it's also until the day passes, which is then fit to be brought the next day. Taisus brings the Gemara where the pasuk discussing the classic case of mechusas man is applied to Oisev Esbinai, indicating that it's excluded for use as a carbon, since there's a certain specific pasuk and a drasha that teaches us the psul of this pasuk applies to Oisev Esbinai. The Torah is clearly indicating that it's not also to a common man. For if it was, it would be necessary to teach. Would not be necessary to teach that it's also as a carbon. It seems like there's a lot that people have to say over here. Okay. Shiluach hakan litzar, according to Rav Ashi's drasha, let a mother bird that was sent away in fulfillment of the mitzvah of sending of a mother from her nest become asur b'hanoah. If a person right, if a person encounters a bird's nest with the mother roosting on eggs or pigeons, he must send away the mother before taking the young, as the Torah commands. He shall not take the mother bird while she's on the young. You shall surely send away the mother. Now, according to Rav Ashi, it follows that since the Torah asks taking the mother bird is a davar asur, and is therefore considered a te'eva, which remains asur forever. Even after one fulfills the Torah's mitzvah to send it away, l'chayra, it's still te'eva and should still be asur. So Zok Gemara, no, loy amra Torah shalach l'takala. The Torah did not instruct to send the mother bird away to create a stumbling block. If the mother bird was taka asur for consumption and bahana, then the Torah would not have commanded that it should be sent away, because since it's indistinguishable from any other bird, this could cause for somebody to be chayte by eating it without realizing that it's asur. We can therefore conclude that there's no isser involved in being nanny from the bird of shiluach hakan. Amrei Shlokish said, "Minayin lebasar b'chalav she'asur." How do we know that basar b'chalav is asur to eat and is asur b'hana? Talmud Lemer, the Torah says, "Al teichlu mimenu no uboshel mevushel." You shall not eat it partially roasted or cooked in water. What are we talking about over here? L'chayra, the Torah says cooking with the double expression of boshel mevushel, when it could have sufficed to say al teichlu mimenu no uboshel. You shall not eat it partially roasted or cooked without the word mevushel. So she'en tam lemar mevushel. Now it was necessary for the Torah to say mevushel for the term uvashel on its own denotes cooking. Matam lemar mevushel. What need then was the Torah was there for the Torah to say mevushel also. Leimelach yesh l'chabish l'achashu kazeh ve'ezeh zeh basar b'chalav, to tell you that there's another cooking that's also for you in consumption, as is this one. And what is this? This is basar b'chalav. Since regarding Korban Pesach, which is where the pasuk says b'sham mevushel b'mayim, the term mevushel is unnecessary, so it's expounded in reference to another cooked dish, and the Torah is instructing the one may not eat it, the Korban Pesach cooked, nor a certain other cooked dish, which must be referring to basar b'chalav, because no other issur regarding cooking appears in the Torah. Amalei Rabbi Yechon asked Shlokish, Amud Beis, Ka'ura zu sheshana Rebbe. Why do you offer this pasuk as the makar? Is it disturbing to you to learn the pasuk that Rebbe taught in the following brayso, lo yisechlenu, a reference to the blood of disqualified karbanos, by psulei hamukdashin? Disqualified karbanos are animals that were consecrated, they were hukdash as karbanos that became disqualified from a mum kavua, a permanent blemish. These karbanos may be redeemed, with the redemption money being used to purchase a replacement carbon, but even after you were paid to them, they retain a measure of kedusha. Now this has the effect of limiting the uses to which they may be put following their pidyon. So a blemished animal for a carbon that was redeemed cannot be sure to use for work, and the pidyon makes it mutter only for shchita and for eating its meat outside the base of mikdash, which is a big shmooze throughout kashim. So lo yisechlenu, in reference to the blood of these disqualified karbanos, the Torah repeats the issur that you shall not eat it. The pasuk says, "Lo techlenu alartzes b'chenu kamayim, lo techlenu l'man yitavlach." You shall not eat it. You should pour it on the ground like water. You shall not eat it, so that it will be good for you. Which teaches that although the redeemed animal is mutter ba'achila, the blood may not be eaten. B'basar b'chalav akasam medaber. Rather, the pasuk over there is talking about the issur of basar b'chalav, meaning lo yitechlenu means you shall not eat it. And the second pasuk does not refer to the dam, which was previously under discussion, but rather to basar b'chalav. So, b'basar b'chalav kasam medaber. Rather, the pasuk is talking about basar b'chalav. Ata omer b'basar b'chalav kasam medaber. And now you say that the pasuk is speaking here about basar b'chalav. Any other b'echad mikol yisurin shabbat Torah. Maybe it's speaking about a different issur in the Torah. Amrit. To this you can respond. go and learn the meaning of the pasuk through one of the Yud Gimel Midas through which the Torah is expounded. Davar Lamed Ben Yanai, specifically the method of a Davar Lamed Ben Yanai, a matter that is learned from its context. Meaning, this is the 12th rule of Rabbi Shmuel's 13 rules of from the Brais of Rabbi Shmuel that prefaces the Sifri, and it said as part of the davening in the morning. It teaches that a pasuk whose meaning is not clear is to be interpreted in light of the context in which it appears. So it has to have shaykhs. Sometimes we don't know exactly what the pasuk means or where the pasuk is going, but from the context of the pasuk will give you a clue as to what you could do with this. So now what's being discussed in the psukim in the context in which the extra you shall not eat appears of the Leisei Chulin b'shnei minim. It's dealing with the pidyon of two disqualified karbanos, which are blends of two kinds. I mean, it's part kachim and part chulin, and they're motor for be'achila as our chulin, and they're also for shearing and work as kachimar. The Gemara B'chayris and Dav Tezvav learns this from the pasuk Tizbach v'chal tabasu yimeshech and eat the meat, which refers to being paida, an animal that has a mum. So the Gemara darshans, you may shech but not shear these animals. You may eat the meat but not the milk. Taisa, however, disagrees with Rashi and holds that the Gemara's classification of the disqualified karbanos, the psulei makdashin, as being a blend of two kinds, is not being talking about part kaidish and part chulin. Rather, it's based on a pasuk where the Torah is medamed them to tzviva ayal, a deer and a hart, Hart, which is one of the chayes in the Torah. So the Torah regards the invalidated carbon as two species at the same time. So here too, then, the Isser expressed in the extra Leisei Chulin is dealing with a blend of two kinds, which would then mean Basa v'chalav. So, for it said Reish Lakish responds to Yechanan like this: if I'm going to learn it out from this pasuk, I would say that Hani Mila Ba'achila, this Isser applies only to eating Basa v'chalav, Aval B'hana Oloi. But being Nana from Basa v'chalav is not also. Now, why? Although we learned on Kufi Dalet Amud Beis that wherever the Torah as is eating, there's also a Isser Hana involved. This does not apply here, because since even according to Rabbi Bo, the Isser against eating blood itself is not kailel the Isser against Hana. So we cannot darshan the extra Isser against eating dam to teach the Basa B'chalav is also even B'hana. Okay, so Kamash Malon. So that's why the Torah needs to inform us that the term avushal that's mentioned in regard to the Korban Pesach is also referring to Basa B'chalav, which would be Asa B'hana as well. It's similar to a cooked Korban Pesach, which is Asa B'achila and for Hana, for kachim that are unfit for Achila, are left overnight and then burnt. The Rebbe, and the Gemara asks, what about Rebbe, who learns out the Isser against eating Basa B'chalav from the pasuk of Leisei Chulin in regard to the blood of psulei makdashin b'hana minole? So how does he know where does he know the Isra Basa B'chalav is also B'hana? Meaning the Gemara doesn't answer that he learns this from Rabbi Bo's drasha, which teaches that a Isra against eating indicates an Isra against Hana also. For that drasha doesn't apply to Dam, as we just said. So the Gemara says we learned it out from a different drasha. Nemar Khan, it says here with regard to Basa B'chalav, Ki am kadosh atal Hashem, you are a holy nation to Hashem. Should not cook a kid in the milk of its mother, and the pasuk says in regarding to his nus, Yisrael. Alright, and there shall not be any promiscuous males among the sons of Klal Yisrael. The exact case referred to by this Isser is the subject of Machlekes. Some understand that it's referring to a male who hires himself out for his nus, while others maintain that it refers to a person who has relations with a shivcha. So, the common terms of Kadosh and Kadesh teach that both words are learned out from the Sherish of Kadosh, which means to prepare it to set aside, which is found many times in the Psukim. So, a person who is designated for his nus is referred to as a Kadosh or Kadesha. The relationship between this use of the term and its use to denote Kedusha is understandable, as we pointed out before. Ramban, however, in his Pirush on Chumash, explains that the basis for the word Kadosh and the term Kedusha is actually one and the same. For at times, two meanings can be ascribed to one word, one the exact opposite of the other. An example of this is the word sheresh, which can be used as sheresh, a root, or sharesh, to uproot. So presumably the derivation here is a gzera, but okay. So Zakti like this. So the common terms kadosh and kadesh teach that mal, ahalam bahano, just like over there regarding znus, the Isser pertains to Hana, the Isser involving Znus, which is a Hana, which is an enjoyment other than consumption. I've come to also to hear with regarding Basar B'chalav, the Isser pertains to Dafka, to Hana. Dvei Rebbe Eliezer Tana, we learned in the Bismedj of Rebbe Eliezer, L'seichlu kol nevela, the pasuk says, "Shall not eat any nevela," right? Which is the pasuk that we said before about B'anshe Kodesh Tiyun Li'basav said the Trefa L'seichlu L'kel Tashlichu Noisai. Sorry, that's the wrong pasuk. A minute. That's the pasuk that we're talking about. So the pasuk says, "You shall not eat any nevela to the ger asher b'sherecha titnena, to the ger taisha was within your gate. You shall give it to va'achal, and he will eat it. Or and you could sell it to a goy. Ki am kadosh atal Hashem lekecha, because you're a holy nation to Hashem your God. L'savashal godi b'chalevim, why shall not cook a kid in the milk of its mother?" So Amra Torah, the Torah is saying, "Shetim kirana l'savashlan of sim kirana." When you sell it to a goy, do not cook it with milk and sell it. Meaning the fact that the Isser against cooking meat with milk immediately follows the Torah's instruction that nevela to be sold to a goy indicates that the Torah is restricting this by saying that nevela is a mutar b'hana, and you may therefore sell it to a goy. You may not cook it in milk. That is a something holding you back from doing that, and that would be what the pasuk says: "L'seichlu kol nevela." So you're not allowed to sell it. Now the Gemara brings another makar, which this is already the third or fourth one, and now this is the next one. It's very Bishmal Tan. We learned in the Bismedj Rabbi Shmuel the Torah mentions the pasuk Leishvashal Gedi B'chalevi might 3 times. Echel Isra Achila, one to aser eating meat with milk. V'echel Isra Hana, I want to prohibit benefiting from Basar B'chalav. V'echel Isra Bishul, I want to aser cooking Basar B'chalav. So all 3 Isurim emerge from the repetition of the single pasuk regarding cooking. Nevertheless, Leishvashal was used by the Torah all 3 times to indicate that even eating or benefiting is only awesome in a Torah when the mixture was cooked. And another Makar, another Brayso. Tani, we learned in the Brayso, Isi ben Yehuda Omer. Isi ben Yehuda says, where do you know that meat with milk is Asr Ba'achila? Namar Kan Pasuk Shteit over here. Where it's over here, in this Pasuk that we said before, L'seichlu kol nevela. L'ger shav shach tetan v'achal emechor l'anochri, Gam kadosh ato Hashem l'kech l'esavasha g'di b'chalevi moi. Gam kadosh ato, Pasuk Shteit, you are a holy people to Hashem, and you should not cook a giti b'chalevi moi v'nam alalon. And the pasuk says regarding the treifa, ba'anshe kodesh tiyun liyabasa basad the treifa le'seichelu l'kelav tashlichun oisai. Right, and that pasuk says that you shall be holy. You should be holy men to me. And meat torn in the field you shall not eat. The common terms of kadosh and kodesh established a Gzera Shava that teaches, meaning it says, Ki am Kodesh Atav, Anshe Kodesh Tionli, Ma'alalan. Also, just like over there, the consumption of a treifa is also Afkan. Also, over here, also the consumption of Basar B'chalav is also mainly Ala B'achila. But now we have established only that Basar B'chalav is also B'achila like Nevela. Mahanomi 9. From where do I know that it's also B'hano as well? Armit Kal V'chaymer. From this, you can say the following Kal V'chaymer. Ma Orla Shlei Nevda Ba'abeira. Now, even if Orla is the fruit of a tree during the first 3 years, which is Asr Min HaTorah. The Gemara in Pesachim Daf Chaf Beis Amud Beis, which we already referenced a couple of times, it learns that both the Achila and the Hana of Arla are Asr. But now, there was no Aveira that was committed by these fruits that grew. The Asura B'Hana is Asr B'Hana. There's no sin in planting a tree. Nevertheless, being nana from its fruit is also the first 3 years. Then regarding meat and milk, which a sin has been committed when you cooked it together, it's not certain that it too is asr b'hana. But the Gemara says you could argue like this. You could count it like this. What comparison can be made to Arla, which is more chomer than Basar B'chalav, because it never had a time when it was mutter, because Arla are prohibited for consumption from the moment they come into being, while Basar B'chalav were each mutter before they were being cooked together. One could argue that the Isser against being nana from Arla can be attributed to the fact that the Arla has more of a chaymer and the Isser from the moment they came to being. In this respect, the Isser against Basar B'chalav is more kal, because basa b'chalav was permitted before they were cooked together. So we won't be able to learn out of kal v'chomer from arla that basa b'chalav is asa b'hana. So Zok the Gemara chametz b'Pesach yechichu. I can answer that chametz on Pesach demonstrates in not having a shas hakosher, a period of time where it was mutter is not a critical factor in rendering a substance asa b'hana. Shayis le'shas hakosher v'asa b'hana. Chametz on Pesach had a period of time before Pesach when it was mutter, and is nevertheless asa b'hana. From the fact that one may eat chametz before Pesach, yet is asa for b'hana on Pesach, we see that isser b'hana is not contingent upon the item not having a time of heter. So although basa b'chalav did have a shas hakosher, did have a time when it was mutter, may nevertheless be asa b'hana, just as chametz on Pesach is asa b'hana, even though it had a shas hakosher. Once again, we could argue in that, and we could say malach chametz b'Pesach shkein amish kares. And if you will counter that, what comparison can be made to chametz on Pesach, which is more chametz than basa b'chalav, and that eating chametz is a chiyuv kares, as the pasuk states in Parashas Bow, Parashas Boy, while the consumption of basa b'chalav is not punishable by kares, meaning that you can't compare basa b'chalav to chametz, because we find that the Torah was more machmir with respect to chametz than it was in regard to basa b'chalav regarding kares. So perhaps with respect to asering b'hana as well, the Torah is stricter with chametz than it is to basa b'chalav. So what kind of, you can't bring me a raya from that. Like the Gemara Kili Akarim Yechichu, I'll answer that Kili Akarim demonstrates that being punishable by kares is not a critical factor in making something asa b'hana, she'ein anush kares, so asa b'hana, because its consumption is not punishable by kares, and it is nevertheless asa b'hana. Okay? From the fact that a person is not chayiv kares for eating Kili Akarim, yet it's asa b'hana, we see that it is against b'hana is not contingent upon the item being asa b'hana because of kares. So although consumption of basa b'chalav does not carry kares, it may nevertheless be asa b'hana, just as Kili Akarim is asa b'hana, even though it does not have the chiyuv kares. So Ishi ben Yehuda, the Gemara is going to go back to his drasha, first learned that basa b'chalav is asa b'hana with the gzeirah shava, and then established that it was asa b'hana with a kal v'chomer. So lamli gzeirah shava. So the Gemara asks, why don't we need gzeirah shava to asa basa b'chalav? Let's say kula b'kal v'chomer me arla. Let's learn everything out from a kal v'chomer from arla as follows. Now, even if arla, which no sin was ever done with, asura bein b'achila bein b'hana, is also both for consumption and for benefit. Basa b'chalav shenevda ba'avera. Then regarding basa b'chalav, which a sin has been committed, ein edin she'asa bein b'achila bein b'hana, is not certain too that it should be also both for consumption and b'hana. The Gemara mentioned the kal v'chomer alone is insufficient, because it could be said that chayrish b'shar b'chamar v'chayzim pipar v'dash b'yechiach, that the cases of a person who plows with an ox and a donkey together, and a case of a person who muzzles the mouth of a cow and threshes with it, proves this kal v'chomer wrong. Shenevda b'hem avera v'sharu, because an avera was done with them, and nevertheless the products of the Isra are permitted to be eaten, and are not only mutter to be eaten, but they're also mutter b'hana. So with regard to basa b'chalav as well, although an avera was done with them, perhaps they nevertheless remain mutter v'achila and v'hana. So you don't have a raya that from arla that it's going to be asa b'hana. So in the Braisa, Isi ben Yehuda challenged the raya from chametz by demonstrating that chametz is more chametz than basa b'chalav, since it carries the punishment of kares. He then proceeded to refute this challenge by bringing Kili Akarim as a raya that carrying the punishment of the kares is not a factor with respect to making a substance asa b'hana. So the Gemara asks, Lama li l'meimar Kili Akarim yechichu. Why do I need to say that Kili Akarim is going to demonstrate that being punishable by kares is not a critical factor in making something asa b'hana? Meaning, why did Isi ben Yehuda find it necessary to introduce a new case to the Braisa to demonstrate this point? Lema arla techiach. Let him say that the previously mentioned arla, which he was talking about, demonstrate that being punishable by kares is not a critical factor in making a substance asa b'hana. And the argument would then repeat, and then it could be learned out from a mehatzad that basa b'chalav is asa b'hana because of tzad hashava. So Rav Ashi says that we cannot learn out that basa b'chalav is asa b'hana from arla and chametz alone, by noting that it shares the common characteristic of being asur b'hana mishum de'ikul l'mem nevela techiach, because it could be said that nevela will show us otherwise. So asur b'achila u'mutaris b'hana, because nevela is asur b'achila and is nevertheless mutar b'hana. Now, however, that Basa B'chalav is being learned from all three, meaning whether Arla, Chametz, and Klayim, no such objection can be raised, because as we'll see, the objection from Nevela is considered a tiyufta from an outside context, meaning it's not Davar Lamed Ben Yonai. So although Rav Ashi held that the common characteristic derivation, meaning a tzad shava, can be refuted from an outside context, nevertheless, he held that the drasha, meaning that the rules of the drasha only allow such an objection to be raised for a pircha from two contexts. Regarding the present three context derivation, meaning Arla, Chametz, and Klayim, though which doesn't use the same type of tzad shava, no such objection can be raised. Okay. Amalei Rav Ashi. So if Mordechai said to Rav Ashi, Achem Minim Shmei Rish Lakish, so we say in the name of Rish Lakish, Kol Ma'atzad Megufay Parchinan. Any common characteristic drasha may be refuted from within, Me'amalei Parchinan, but if you bring a raya from somewhere else, it cannot have a pircha. Meaning we'll give a pircha to a tzad shava only by demonstrating that two mekayris within themselves, meaning davar lamed ben yonai, common characteristic not shared by the target context. We cannot, however, disprove the conclusion that this common characteristic is the basis for this halacha by demonstrating that there's some outside context that shares the, meaning if it's not megufa, but if it's me'alma, then it will not work because it won't share the common halacha. Since this is not an acceptable pircha, your argument that nevela, which is not me'en yonai, meaning it's me'alma, which is asur ba'achila, and mutzar b'hana, demonstrates that we cannot learn out basur b'chala from a tzad shava from Arla and Chametz, meaning that the lumdus would be that nevela, Chametz, and Arla would make a good pircha, would make a good tzad shava to learn out basur b'chala, but because you're not taking it me gufa, you're taking nevela me alma. It doesn't have any shaykhs to the. It has shaykhs obviously, but it doesn't have the same kind of shaykhs that the other two things have. So then you can't learn out raya from here. Yihachi. So now we rejected Rav Ashi's answers to the original question of the Gemara remains in place. Yihachi, if that's true, Teisi b'ma'atzat, let the isser against being nanted from basur b'chala be learnt out by means of the tzad hashava from the previously mentioned cases of Arla and Chametz. Why was it necessary for Isi ben Yehuda to introduce a third case of Kilei HaKaram to learn out that basur b'chala is asur b'hana? So Zakti Gemara, we shouldn't equal an efrach, because we could have a percha on the tzad hashava as follows: Mala tzad hashava shebehan sheken gedulei karka. What comparison can be made to the cases which share the common characteristic that they grow from the ground? Meaning, although the fact that a substance grows from the ground is not a logical basis on which the chomer with respect to asering a substance for benefit, nevertheless, the fact that basur b'chala differs from Arla and Chametz in this respect precludes us from comparing the latter to the former on the basis of a tzad shava derivation. Meaning, that's not going to change the halacha, the fact that something is from the ground or not from the ground. Who cares? That doesn't really make a difference. But the pshat is that it's something that's different than them, so that will maybe make a difference. If that's true, that the difference between basur b'chala on one hand and Arla and Chametz on the other hand precludes us from learning out the isser against hana, meaning the isser hana from those two alone. How does Isi ben Yehuda solve the issue by introducing Kilei HaKaram? So Ashtanami, even now that we introduce Kilei HaKaram into the tzad shava, Ikul Mefrach, who can still have the same percha as follows: Mala Kilei HaKaram sheken gedulei karka. What comparison can be made to Kilei HaKaram which grow from the ground? So Amalei Rav Ashi, the Gemara answers when Mordechai said to Rav Ashi, Achem Minim Shmei Rish Lakish. This we say in the name of Rish Lakish. Kol Ma'atzad Parchin and Kol Dehu. Any Ma'atzad we can give a percha with a mere distinction. Meaning it doesn't need to be a graisa lamdus. Wherever we wish to learn out that a halacha stated with respect to two contexts applies to a third context through a tzad shava, you can give a pircha by demonstrating anything that's going to show that it's not in common with it. But regarding a no for if you said argument, right? Lo'im amrit is a expression of Tanakh found throughout the Gemara, which is used to introduce an objection to a mamatzino, by demonstrating a difference between the source and the target context. In actuality, that type of objection is the one that was used here for the objection, and no comparison can be made to client, meaning lo'im amrit kilei HaKaram right? That you can't learn out Basar B'Chalav from Kilei HaKarim. So if you have a Loyim Amrit, so which is addressing a case in which the limud is not by means of a Me'atzad, so then Kal V'Chomer Parchinan, with a Kal V'Chomer, meaning showing that that something here is more Kal, or showing that something here is more Chomer, we should be able to refute it with that. But Kol Du'ulei Parchinan. But with a mere distinction, we won't be able to give a Pircha. Meaning the Gemara is contrasting two types of droshes. In its Tzad Shava, an objection is raised due to a difference between the source and the target, which is resolved by demonstrating from a second context that this difference is not a factor. An objection is raised regarding the second context as well, that it too contains an aspect that's different from the target context, at which point the original context is reintroduced. To demonstrate that difference is not the determining factor. It's only regarding such a limud of a tzad shava that we say that a mere distinction between the target context and the source context can be cited as an objection. Okay, this goes on and on. Let's go weiter. So kol du'ulei parchinan. So had we learned that the Isser Hana of Basar B'Chalav through a tzad shava, we would have been able to have a pircha from a koldahu, meaning anything that's not 100% the same. Meaning you can say, well, that part, it's not 100%. Now, however, that we learn out from Klayim, and it's not by Mehatzad, so then it cannot be refuted with meaning Kalachimer Parchinan, but called Hulay Parchinan. So you cannot learn it out from, it cannot have a pirch with the mere distinction. In fact, the Gemara goes, so let's bring a pircha to all three, meaning Orla, Chametz, and Klayim, with the argument the Malakulush King Gedula Karka. What comparison can be made to all of them which share the common characteristic that they all grow in the ground? This is Zakti Gemara, that this is what we say in the name of Rish Lakish. Chada mechada kula v'chomer parchinan kaldahu loy parchinan. That when a halacha pertaining to one context is being learnt out from one source context, if we can raise something kal or something chamer in the source of the context vis-a-vis the proposed target context, we could refute it. But kaldahu loy parchinan. But if we can only raise a mere distinction, we do not refute it. So I just want to try to finish this up a little bit, so we'll go a few more lines down to Kufta Zayin Amid Aleph. But one context is being derived from two Mekairis, afilu koldu parchinan, even if you have one tiny nafkamina, you would have a percha. So on one context is being learned out from three sources. So if it's necessary for the arguments to repeat the halacha, and the halacha is learned out from the Mahatzad, Parchinan Kaldu, we could refute it even with a tiny distinction but if it's not necessary for the arguments to repeat, Kula v'chomer Parchinan, we can raise a Kula or a Chomer in the source, and we could make a Pircha, Kaldu like Parchinan, but if we can only raise a mere distinction, we do not refute it. Okay, Ad Kan, Dav, Kuv Tez Vav.